Mm-hmm. Malia.
All right, so it's 4 p.m. and I think we are ready to start. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for some of you who are joining on a different time zone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar, the 7th in the series of webinars that we've been doing since the start of this crisis. Today, we are happy to be partnering with GIZ to conduct this webinar for the tourism sector. And if you allow me, let me introduce our panelists for today. Mr. Volker Adams, who is the head of the political affairs and outbound travel at the German Travel Association. Mr. Adams will be speaking about recent developments in the tourism sector in the EU with a focus on Germany. Our second speaker is Ms. Marijke Bentfield, who is also advisor for the Global Initiative on Disaster Risk Management with the GIZ. Her presentation will be talking about the building of resilience of hotels in times of crisis. Our third speaker, last but not least, is Dr. Andreas Hoffmann, who is the project manager for sector project cooperation with the private sector, specifically the component on sustainable development tourism with the GIZ as well. His presentation will be talking about the development, cooperation, reactions and adjustment to the COVID-19 crisis. Before we kick off, I would like to invite our colleague from the GIZ MSME project, Mr. Ziad Maaita, to just set the scene and give us a brief idea about the project, what they've been doing in Jordan over the past few years, specifically also in the last few months with COVID-19. So Ziad, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you, everyone, and good day. Thank you for participation. I'd like to thank JITOA for organizing this webinar, and of course my GIZ colleagues for supporting, and special thanks to Mr. Adams for his input. So before we start, just a quick brief on our project. Let me share the screen. For the participants who haven't been participating with us before. So a general idea about GIZ in Jordan. So GIZ in Jordan has a portfolio of 408 million euros, and we work in different sectors, including the water, the waste, education, employment and financial systems, the TIVET cluster, environment and climate, and mental health support and psychological support, in addition to further cooperation projects. So our project is within the employment cluster at the GIZ Jordan. We have a portfolio of 57 million euros, and we're currently 5 projects, including our project that focuses on MSMEs, and the Trade for Employment project that focuses on trade and export promotion. We have the employment promotion project, Employment 2030, which was recently launched, and the Digitances, which focuses on digital financial services. So within the employment cluster, we have 4 pillars: employment promotion, supporting the business development, inclusion, and sustainability. Our project is commissioned by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. We call it the BMZ. The political partner in Jordan is the Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Supply. Of course, we have other key stakeholders we work with, like the JETCO, Jordan Enterprise Development Corporation, the different ministries like Ministry of Tourism. And our main work is with business associations within the sectors we work in. So for example, we have been working with JITOA for around 2 years now. Our budget is 10 million, and the duration of our project is from 2018 until 2024. Our project focuses on creating and sustaining more job opportunities through focusing on micro, small, medium enterprises. We work in 3 fields of activities: enhancing sector competitiveness, MSMEs, competencies and skills, and improving the business and investment climate. In addition to the tourism sector, we work in the food processing and the ICT sector. So our support in the Jordanian or for the Jordanian tourism sector includes a number of items. So we've conducted a tourism sector analysis and strategy. which was conducted in a participatory approach with the different associations that provided an overview of the sector challenges and opportunities and offered recommendations for improved competitiveness. We're also working on promoting the digital transformation of tourism MSMEs, which mainly focuses on improving the service provision mechanisms of the tourism sector associations and enhancing the linkages with the global and local digital platforms. Another field is the product development and innovation, where again, we work with the associations on promoting their capacity to support product development and innovation in the sector. We're also engaged in facilitating industry and public-private dialogues under a number of umbrellas, for example, the Jordan Chamber of Commerce, JITOA, JITOA, and the different associations. Lastly, we're working with the Ministry of Tourism on streamlining the licensing procedures, which was based on recommendations put by the World Bank to make the process easier for businesses to license and register their businesses. Last item I want to mention, and later my colleague Andreas will complement what I say, is another initiative initiated by the BMZ is Impact, which is a program, a 6-month program that focuses on supporting innovative businesses in the tourism sector that were affected by COVID-19. It's a 6-month program that provides expert workshop on crisis management, on business planning, in addition to financial support of up to 9,000 euros per company. There will be an application process that started yesterday and ends end of September. We can provide you with the details later on, and a total of 15 to 20 companies will be chosen to be supported and enrolled in this program. Thank you, everyone. I'll hand over to Omar to continue with the webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ziad, for setting the scene. And please, throughout the presentation, if anyone has any questions or comments they would like to raise, please type them in the chat box. We will be collecting them towards the end and addressing them to the panelists on your behalf. Also appreciate if you can keep your mics on mute so we can have the speakers loud and clear. So to kick off our first speaker, Mr. Volker Adams, I would leave the floor for you, sir. So please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I will try and see how much IT competence I have in finding my slides. Is it working? Yes. Jumped a few. Yes, maybe I'm thinking about, first of all, giving you a brief overview about what the German tourism market looks generally, then maybe give you a brief introduction what DRV is doing and does, and then I'm just going to give you a brief overview about what impact COVID-19 is having on German tourism industry, and what we believe is going to happen in the next couple of months, and how this might impact incoming agencies and partner organizations in Jordan. And I will finish by giving you some thoughts about what we believe as at DRV about how tourism is going to develop in a general way, not so much focusing on the calamity of COVID, but more or less getting the future tourists into perspective, how people are thinking of spending their future vacations. So let me start off with having a look at the German tourism sector as such. We had a great year in 2019 and we're expecting an even better year in 2020. Unfortunately, something happened, so that didn't really work out. But as a whole, you can say about 70 to 80% of Germans travel on a regular basis, spending vacations and time off within Germany or outside of Germany. At least 55 million people from Germany went on a vacation of at least 5 days. And Germans tend to spend quite a lot of money on travel. And what is quite interesting is that when it comes to the main vacations, Germans have around 30 days of days off work, which is quite a large amount in international comparison. So they tend to have more than one vacation a year, and the larger the summer, it's usually the summer vacation that is more or less 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time sometimes, and Germans tend to spend their holidays abroad, or the larger part of their time off, and it's up to 74% of the Germans travel abroad, and only, I guess, something like 24% of the vacations are spent within Germany. We see a tendency that quite a lot of the vacations are organized, especially the long-haul vacations. When people take a plane to fly abroad, it's usually with a tour operator. For the short-term vacations, people go to Booking.com or the other platforms and just book a hotel and get a flight. But for the prolonged vacations, people go into the travel agency and book through the travel agency. So next slide. Yes. What does the German Travel Association DRV do? We obviously represent tour operators and travel agents. We have about 4,000 company members, which are responsible for about 95% of the turnover in the sector. Quite a large part. So we are quite inclusive. DRV is the third largest travel association worldwide, following ASTA in the US and APTA in the UK, and we might be overtaking APTA sometime. We will have to see how the Brexit turns out and what sort of effects that will have on the UK travel industry. So we will see how things are going to work out. So what do? We represent our members' interests in politics and business and in the public. We do a lot of crisis and safety management for travel industry. It's usually not the COVID scenarios. It's usually you have conflicts in certain countries, or there's something happening somewhere, volcanoes or natural disasters, and we help evacuate holiday makers. Quite a lot of our member companies are with us because they get fiscal and legal support through our association, especially the smaller travel agencies join in because of this. We do a lot of business support. We help implement industry standards. We do a lot in the area of sustainability and climate protection, and we do assist destinations that are catering for the German source market. So quite often destinations approach us and ask us how we believe their tourism product is faring on the German source market, in what way to develop the product so Germans and Europeans in general will be interested in coming to the destination, and obviously asking us about marketing opportunities, how to market a destination effectively on the German source market, which is not that easy as it seems to be on by first glance. So these are different fields. We are supporting our members, and our members seem to be more or less happy about the way we work and with the support we are giving them. So we get quite a lot of positive feedback. Coming to the next slide. Yes, how and what effect is COVID-19 having on the German travel industry? I mean, you're seeing, we are all witnessing empty airports. We have probably same with you in Jordan. Our travel agencies and tour operators have had a very hard time handling the situation because we have had travel restrictions. It has been very difficult for Germans to spend their vacations even within Germany, but outside of Germany has been very, very difficult. We have seen a shutdown of many of the major holiday destinations. During the summer months, some of the restrictions were dropped. German tour operators were able to bring customers to the Canary Islands, to Spain. Greece was okay, and even parts of Turkey could be catered for. But in the end, we have seen a very large number of potential holiday makers who didn't go on holiday but stayed at home. We had quite a large amount of holiday makers who usually would have spent a lot of money going abroad, but spent even more money traveling to parts of Germany to spend their vacations within Germany. And it's been a more or less the numbers I've showed you, 70% going abroad and 25% staying within Germany. This year we had about 60% staying in Germany, 20%, maybe a little more, spending their vacations abroad, and a large part not going on holiday, staying at home. And this is obviously very detrimental for a sector, tourism branch, that is very much focused on outbound tourism, as we are. Our member companies are, I mean, we earn our money by bringing our customers abroad, and not because travel within Germany is usually not organized. So we have witnessed a massive slump in sales of more than 75% compared to 2019. 65% of all travel companies are assessing their situation as economically threatening. They are hoping to pull through somehow, but it's going to be a very difficult crunch. And we have seen that 50% of the companies have already laid off employees or are expecting to do so. So we have still seen and witnessed not so many companies going bust, but this is mainly due to the fact that there has been some assistance by the German government. We have seen that the German government has supported tourism companies with something called Überbrückungshilfe. That's a fund that covers part of the fixed costs. 80% of the fixed costs are covered: rent, power, wages, loss in commission even, and margin losses, which is a great help, especially for the travel agencies, that they're getting part of their commission through the German government. This is helping them a great deal, and probably if things go well, due to this help, we will see that a great number of travel agencies will pull through until next year, until hopefully the market will reopen again. What we've also have, another tool by the German government is the Kurzarbeit, which is employment supplements. If there's not enough work around for employees, as a company, you are able to send your employees home, and the employees get a part of their wages paid by government, and that helps companies to not lay off their workers. And this is something that is quite effectful. German government has prolonged this tool of the Kurzarbeit until the end of next year. So even if the crisis stays, we have the possibility through Kurzarbeit to keep the employees within the sector. So maybe to give you some thoughts about what we believe is going to happen, and what the future effects of for the travel industry and travel as a whole might be. Maybe some thoughts on the sidelines. First of all, we believe that hygiene aspects will play a more important role in the future. Even if COVID should disappear, people will tend to be more aware of hygiene matters, and will have a closer look when going through airports, check-ins, hotels, restaurants, and all of this. So I believe in the past, hygiene has played an important role, but it will be even more important in the future. And obviously, we are seeing how destinations are bringing thought to this matter: safety, hygiene protocols, cooperation with hotels and hospitals. This is something that probably will stay, and it's a positive fact, I believe, something, a positive trend. Furthermore, we are going to see more flexibility in planning and organizing of holiday trips. Probably we will have generous cancellation policies in the future, just because we are going to see that holiday makers are saying, okay, I want to be sure that if something happens, I can change destinations or change hotels or do something completely different. They are going to pay more money for this. Obviously, they will have to. It won't work without getting putting the price tag on the whole thing, but there's going to be a larger amount of uncertainty to go around. The other two parts are probably something that are part of a more general development. We are seeing that customers are looking for a more authentic travel experience. They prefer smaller hotels. They like traveling in peer groups. They're not too much in favor of the accommodations they probably are acquainted to from traveling with their parents 20 years ago. So it's not so much a beach and sun experience in a large hotel compound, but they are trying to get something more, you know, closer to what they imagine is something unique to the area, and they want to feel like they're getting in touch with the locals, and they want to come back and tell friends and family about this experience. This is something I believe is a direction we are developing in. And the second thing is we are witnessing a more active sort of tourism. People, even the elderly, even the 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, are keen on hiking, on doing all sorts of activities. They don't want to stay in the hotels. They want to get to know parts of the country and the places they are visiting, and they want to have the feel that they're having a sort of adventure, but without the risks. So this is something quite interesting for destinations like Jordan, where you'd probably have a lot of sites and many things you can do and activities, and I believe that a large palette of possibilities is something that is very, very positive if you're a destination and thinking about getting in new customers and getting customers to give you a positive review and talk about the lovely holiday experience they've had visiting your country. So there's quite a lot of things going for Jordan. So keep fingers pressed that the COVID epidemic is hopefully over soon, and we will be able to start traveling again. It's going to take some time for Germany. We still have a general travel warning for countries outside of the European Union, 160 countries, at least until October 2020, probably longer. We are trying to persuade our Foreign Office to get a more differentiated view on travel warnings, but it's a very tricky and difficult situation, and I can't make any promises in that direction, I fear. But thank you very much for your patience, and yeah, I'm looking forward to joining in to the discussion afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, for your insights. Indeed, the German market, as my colleagues would agree on the call, is an important feeder market for Jordan, and we are all anticipating to kickstart the travel flows once again. Thank you for that. Next, I would like to ask Ms. Miraike Bentfield to present her presentation about building the resilience of hotels. I will be sharing her presentation and she would be walking us through it. So just give me 1 second.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for having me on this panel. I'm really excited to be part of it. I can't see the presentation yet. not sure that it's working.
The presentation is on.
Okay, so I can't see it, which makes it a little bit harder for me to keep on track, but it's fine. I actually, because maybe just like a fun fact, at the start, GIZ isn't actually allowed to use Zoom. So it's sometimes a little bit complicated because now I'm using my own iPad in order to be able to join, but it's impossible to share everything and see everything at the same time. Oh, there are some other people who can't see it either.
I'm trying
so maybe it's not just me.
Trying to fix that as well. So
okay, anyways, maybe in the meantime I can just
sure.
Introduce myself again and introduce the project I'm working for. So I'm working for the Global Initiative on Disaster Risk Management, which is a project that is being implemented by GIZ, the German Development Corporation. Okay, now it's on. And it's commissioned by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And I'm actually based in Germany, Bonn now. So in my presentation, I would actually like to share some thoughts on the current crisis from a disaster risk management perspective and introduce you to the Hotel Resilient Initiative, an initiative that develops standards for hotels and resorts to increase their resilience with regard to climate and disaster risks. And based on the experience that we have from this initiative, I would then also highlight or share some aspects that I think are especially important in the current recovery phase and in the current reopening of the tourism industry in order to build a more resilient tourism industry in the future. But before I start, because I'm not sure in how far you are actually familiar with the German Development Corporation, I'm just going to say 2 sentences about what GIZ actually does in the world. So GIZ is a service provider in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development and international education work. And our work is dedicated to shaping a future worth living around the world. Next slide. And GIZ is supporting the German government in achieving its objectives in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development. To put it another way, maybe a little bit easier, so GIZ is a federal enterprise that supports change for Germany and around the globe. And as you can see on this slide now, the areas we work in are extremely diverse. We're working in displacement and migration, environment and climate, rural development, sustainable infrastructure, social development, economic development and employment, security, reconstruction and peace, and governance and democracy. And from a development perspective, the tourism sector is actually a really important tool to create inclusive development, to create jobs, and also to support sustainable economic development. Moving to the tourism sector now, moving to the current crisis. So this is actually just highlighting the current crisis response to COVID-19 that we've been witnessing. So as we all know, especially in this webinar, the tourism sector is one of the most affected sectors when it comes to COVID-19, with millions of jobs and billions, if not trillions of USD expected to be lost in 2020 as a direct impact of the travel restrictions that have been imposed all over the world because of COVID-19. And in crisis situations, we tend to focus on mitigating the immediate impacts. And this is always like the first step, but in the case of COVID, we have seen a lot of different efforts in order to mitigate the impacts. So for example, we've seen tourism businesses starting to generate alternative resources, for example, by providing consume-at-home products. We've seen businesses trying to minimize their revenue loss by, for example, postponing travels instead of allowing for cancellations. We've been seeing them redeploying assets, for example, the use of hotels as healthcare facilities or quarantine facilities. And then we've also seen a couple of government initiatives in order to support the industry in different ways. So however, instead of only looking at mitigating the immediate impacts and ensuring that we can go back to normal as soon as possible, we should also be thinking about ways to improve the sector and individual businesses in the tourism industry. So in the field of disaster risk management, and as I said earlier, this whole presentation comes a little bit from this perspective. This process is often described as build back better, and it's based on the assumption that during crisis, we actually do have an opportunity for change and transformation. So investing in resilience will be especially important after the current crisis, because what we've been seeing, and this is also what has been highlighted in the previous presentation, is that tourists are most likely going to be way more risk aware and need to gain trust in destinations again. So being able to showcase preparedness measures, being able to showcase, for example, crisis response plans, business continuity management measurements, and compliance with risk management standards might actually increase the trust of tourists in certain destinations and lead to a faster and more sustainable recovery of the tourism sector in the long term. So now I'm actually going to start sharing with you a little bit about the Hotel Resilient initiative that we've been working on. And maybe just to put that in the front, the idea of this initiative was always to build the resilience of hotels and resorts very specifically as part of the tourism industry by developing international recognized standards on climate and disaster risk management. And I would also like to highlight that right now, a lot of the discussions are actually evolving around COVID-19, but it is very important to keep in mind that the tourism sector is not only vulnerable to pandemics, but it is also especially vulnerable to climate and disaster risks, as it's often located in very risk-prone areas, for example, next to beaches, next to rivers, or in mountainous areas. So even singular catastrophic events, for example, a flood or a typhoon, that are limited to certain destinations can cause widespread damage, impact private and public investments in tourism destinations, and damage the country's image and reputation. And at the same time, obviously, the lives of tourists, the workers, and surrounding communities might be affected by these disastrous events. So understanding the risk and understanding what we're dealing with in a certain location, in a certain destination, is crucial in order to build resilience and be better prepared for the future. So after we have a better understanding of what risks we are facing, the question is, how can we reduce some of these risks, and how can we prepare ourselves for the worst case scenario? And this is exactly the question that we asked ourselves in 2013. And back in 2013, together with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction and the Pacific Asia Travel Association, PATA, we launched the Hotel Resilient initiative, as you can see on the current slide. So the initiative was actually based on the finding that while the tourism sector is very vulnerable to a variety of risks, and is also quite often very much aware of the risk they are facing, there's a very limited understanding about what exactly should be done and how risk can be minimized and how different actors can prepare themselves for the worst case scenario. And the assumption behind the Hotel Resilient initiative is that investing in your own or their own resilience will not only provide hotels with a unique market advantage, but it will also help them save time, money, and resources. And this is done through reduced downtime and revenue losses. If you have enhanced business resilience and management processes that are more resilient to certain events, for example, business continuity planning, you will ensure that there's less downtime and you are going to lose less money in times of crisis. Second assumption is that there will be savings on insurance premiums. So for example, different insurance providers will recognize the efforts that have been taken by certain businesses and will actually reduce certain premiums. The next one is better time and resource management. So through structured crisis management and business continuity processes, and through streamlining tasks and activities, you will be able to use the resources you have more efficiently and therefore save money and time again. And then also the building of trust and reputation, what I mentioned earlier, being able to show customers that they are going to be safe and secure in your destination or in your business will likely increase your attractiveness to certain customers and will allow you to generate more business. Next slide, please. And I think one more click. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So within the Hotel Resilient Initiative, we developed the standards for disaster risk management for hotels and resorts. And this process was actually led by a German university, the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and together with a consortium of a lot of different universities in Germany, the UK, Australia, and also a lot of private sector partners. So it has really been developed by the industry for the industry, together with scientific or research institutions. So as you can see on the right-hand side, the Hotel Resilience standards are divided in 3 different components. And each of these components is actually focusing on one specific aspect of a resilient hotel. The building component is looking at the vulnerability of a hotel or resort, the actual building, and it can be used by hotel management to assess the vulnerability of the building to multiple hazards. For example, floods, earthquakes, typhoons, strong winds, like anything you can think of. And items, for example, that are included, or indicators that are included in this component are, for example, the shape of the building, the way windows are attached, and these kind of things. The systems component is looking at the physical design and the implementation of hotel equipment, infrastructure, and other integrated systems. So for example, there are some indicators related to escape routes, the signage of escape routes, and these kind of things. Last but not least, the management component is looking at comprehensive disaster and crisis management systems. This includes, for example, capacity building measures for staff, development of various plans, including business continuity plans, for example, and also the organization of simulation exercises. The standards in general are always provided as recommendation and can be locally adapted to the particular context, geography, or size of the hotel or resort as needed. This takes, for example, into account that a resort, for example, next to a beach, will face very different risk and very different infrastructure problems than a hotel in a very dense urban area, for example. And it also takes into account local provisions, for example, building codes that are that they need to comply with in specific destinations. However, just developing the standards was considered insufficient in order to engage hotels in their own resilience building. As you might also experience in the past, I mean, a standard itself is just a list of requirements, and it would be easy to just kind of read through it, put it in the shelf, and just never look at it again. So what we did is we embedded the standards in this whole hotel resilience system, which has a training component and a software component. And I will just highlight a little bit what we did, especially for the software part, because this might be interesting. So the first app that that has been developed is a risk analytics app. So hotels are actually able to enter information related to their own building, related to their own business into the app. And then the software can access disaster risk databases and can actually tell hotels exactly what the potential losses are with regard to various hazards based on the vulnerability and based on the risk profile of the specific location. And then we have the Hotel Resilient audit web application, and this is actually a management tool, and it allows hotels to really manage the implementation of the standards and assign certain tasks to certain staff and track performance over time. The training that has been developed has been developed in order to support hotels in understanding the contents of the standard and how these standards should be implemented in practice. And there are a couple of e-learning courses that have been developed for that. And the modules are evolving a little bit around the standards, so building systems and management, but it's covering also DRR, so disaster risk reduction in general, crisis communication, specifically preparedness and response for hotels and resorts, and then also business continuity building. So based on our experience, hotels and resorts are super interested in this whole package because they often lack the idea how to engage in resilience building, because there is no guidance out there, and having the standards plus the software and the training is actually a really easy way for individual hotels to engage in resilience building and ensure that they are more resilient to future crisis events. So in addition to working with the hotels, we've also been working with ministries of tourism and tourism associations in pilot countries. And it was started in Southeast Asia. So we've been mostly been working with the Philippines and the Maldives on hotel resilient. And one of the ideas is to link the hotel resilience standards with, for example, national star rating systems in order to increase or facilitate the implementation of the standards in the tourism sector in specific countries. And we're also trying to identify potential financial incentives for hotels that are engaging in hotel resilient. Okay, next slide. So this is, and maybe one more click, there's something missing again. Not sure why. Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is actually my last slide, and this is just a little bit of a takeaway based on what I just presented, based on our experience with building resilience. So as I said earlier, crisis situations do provide an opportunity for change and transformation. And with the current experience with COVID-19 and the impact it had on the tourism sector, we do have this unique opportunity to reinvent the tourism in certain ways and think about how we want to rebuild tourism in order to make it more resilient in the future. And the 4 points that I would like to highlight are the ones you can see on the slide. So first of all, it's very important to really understand the risks. Right now, there's obviously a lot of focus on COVID-19, but I think this situation right now really provides an opportunity to look a little bit further and see what else is out there and really engage in this resilience building efforts. The second one is plan for the future. So engaging in business continuity planning, developing crisis response plans, and also showcasing these achievements to the outside is really important in the current time and also in the next month and maybe even years to come. Third, it's super important to build partnerships, because it's not possible to build resilience without having a very strong risk governance framework that includes both private and public actors to deal with potential crisis situations and increase coordination between different actors in times of crisis. And last but not least, and this is always important, it's a good opportunity to invest in skills and capacity building right now. So engaging staff and management from tourism businesses in capacity building and upskilling activities is key right now. Learning how to prepare for a crisis event and also acquiring transferable skills is key to ensure that there is individual resilience to crisis, but also then resilience to the business and to the sector as a whole. So this is what I would like to share with you, and I'm happy to answer more questions in the discussion after the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Benfield. Very insightful and interesting approach to a more proactive approach, if you will, to disasters and risks before happening. Our third and final speaker is Dr. Andreas Hoffman, who will be shedding some light on reactions and adjustments to COVID-19 from a more development point of view. So I will leave the floor with him. Dr. Hoffman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you very much to JITOA for the invitation today and the opportunity to speak about what GIZ is doing worldwide. Also, official greetings to Director General Mr. Rifai. Thank you for joining the call today as well. I will contextualize a little bit what Volker and Mareike just told, to take a little bit more of a big picture view and maybe also reflect a little bit about the emotions we encounter in the world of tourism at the moment. And the presentation is starting, I hope. Can you all see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, I'm sitting here in Germany, in Bonn, where we have a global team considering tourism as an instrument for sustainable development. So on the behalf of the BMZ, we take a look at how can various kind of projects use tourism as an instrument for developing in terms of economic development, social development, cultural development, also environmental development. And as you know, currently tourism is not in a good shape. This crisis is unprecedented since tourism has been invented as a social and economic activity. Everywhere, 100% of tourism destinations, they do have travel restrictions due to the COVID crisis. According to UNWTO's impact assessment, we will have up to 1.1 billion less international arrivals. That's a number, I can't even count the digits in that number. We will lose up to 1.2 trillion US dollars in export revenue globally, and only the formal jobs, up to 120 million direct jobs in tourism, are at danger, and many millions more in the informal tourism economy. And that, of course, is also affecting vulnerable groups, women, young people the most, not only in Jordan, not only in the developing world, but from the United States to Spain, to Jordan, to Thailand, everywhere in the world is currently affected, and that at the same time. And this crisis of source markets and destinations at the same time, we never had that before. But of course, GIZ is also globally present on behalf of BMZ with over 100 projects dealing with one aspect or another of tourism. Siad introduced his project, which is dealing with skills development, development of local companies, and Mareike introduced her approach to disaster preparedness in the context of tourism. And we have many more projects dealing with tourism, for example, biodiversity, skills and vocational education, and all of them are affected. All of them had to rethink what they are doing completely. Plans had to be rewritten, and they had to think anew, what does it mean for me as a project trying to use tourism for development? Can we still use tourism for development? Luckily, the answer is yes, we can still consider tourism as an important factor for development. It's almost cynical, but also quite important. This crisis actually showed decision makers up in the hierarchy, also in our ministry, that tourism matters. In the past, we were like little sardines, small projects here and there, compared to larger projects or also to larger companies. We did not have a Siemens or an Airbus or an SAP or any of these large companies, because we are many small companies. But if you look at this picture, this swarm or school of sardines, it's heavier than the whale you can see. And that's it with tourism as well. We always have a difficulty making our voice heard in tourism because they see us as small fish, not realizing that tourism is actually the third largest industry in the world, bigger than the whales. This one now has become clear in the crisis. It's a very bad situation that this finally became clear, but it is helping us to make the point to take tourism really serious in the world of international development. And that's an opportunity we also have to develop. Key adjustments in our projects worldwide has been to rethink about from creating jobs or skills to stabilizing and saving jobs, to instead of just upskilling, to look at reskilling and transferable skills to help people who lose their job in tourism to transition at least intermediary into other careers, or to upgrade their skills to be ready when tourism is restarting. So there's actually a lot of work to be done to make sure we have also a resilient recovery for the people who are affected at the moment. Knowledge and management skills, as Mareike outlined in detail, is really key at the moment. This is also driving e-learning and digitalization. We have a larger program on with a learning platform and e-learning content, which we're starting to fill up to make it globally accessible, called atingi.org. Also other projects are realizing, yes, we can do much more by sharing content, by developing content in one country and sharing it across borders. That has never been done before. Like, the crisis is really forcing us or fostering collaboration between projects within GIZ, but also with across to other organizations. So we had many more talks than in the past about collaboration with the civil society actors in tourism, with other agencies, UNESCO, UNWTO, and the interest is unprecedented and high to do more. And I think us working in technical cooperation, meaning education, training, and capacity building, especially the hopefully upcoming recovery phase, will show that these new connections, these new networks will really come to be effective and at helping the tourism industry and tourism communities in many destinations to recover. The new power couple in town is sustainability and resilience. There's been a lot of talk about responsible and sustainable tourism, sustainability as a product, sustainability pay, circular economy, green economy approaches. But I think Mareike made the point very clear that without resilience, without having management processes that consider that bad things can happen and happen frequently, we will not be able to rebuild better. So this crisis again shows us it's important to upgrade our management skills in the tourism industry. And here maybe as a footnote, before working for GIZ, I have been working for Cooni as a product manager and also as a managing director for a destination management company. So when I talk to my former staff or colleagues, it really shows that these thoughts of business continuity management, these thoughts on, yes, it's a crisis. We had other crises before, but we get through that is really important. They also tell me, look, we know we cannot sell anything at the moment, but we can upgrade our products. We can keep our relationships alive. And now it's also important to work across our supply chains to save weaker partners in the supply chain, because we will need them once tourism is rebounding. And Volker showed us people actually do have a desire to travel once that is possible again. So what's next in tourism development? So we will survive, not the virus. I think that is clear, and the whole world is working towards that goal. And meanwhile, our advice is our old advice is our new advice. Travel restrictions will be here to stay for a little while until the world has figured out how to deal with this point of health security. That's a second bullet point. Like in 9/11, we had security concerns introduced into our travel patterns. Now, nobody thinks about any longer that we have to take our shoes at airport control. That's a thing that happened around the 9/11 time. like there was a lot of protests. Now we have health security, and that will also be included in the routine of traveling. At some point, it will become a new normal. And until then, tourism destinations that consider both local, regional, then global markets, that do not rely on monocultures of source markets and products, to have a diversified product offering from diversified source markets, and work hard to not be too dependent on seasonality, they will do better. And now is actually also a good time to reconsider also products suitable for the local market, because we will need it in the meanwhile until we have this new normal of travel regimes established. And all these problems surrounding tourism are really bad, but at the same point, they show us how important tourism is, how important it is for different economies, how important it is for development, and that we have to take it serious. We have to take the concerns of tourism companies, tourism employees, and also tourism destinations serious. And I hope that international development partners can help to foster dialogue between these different stakeholders and concerns to, well, foster or shepherd or support us through this crisis together. So it is a catastrophic crisis. Everything had to adjust, everything had to change in tourism development, but I still believe that tourism can play an important role for sustainable development, and we have to take this chance for the future to build back better. And that's my 2 cents on the current crisis. And last but not least, I also want to remind you on the open call by NPACT, which I will post you a link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hoffman. I can say that this was short, sharp, and sweet, straight to the point, reminding us about how opportunity lies even beyond the crisis that we are going through. His Excellency Dr. Talib Rifai is also with us on the call. I'm sure he's also going to add his 2 cents about the presentations that were just given out. So, Your Excellency.
Hello, Omar. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Good, good. Good, good.
Can you please maybe share some insights?
Let me put my
Can you hear us, Dr. Talib?
This is better, right?
Yes, we can hear you. We can see you clearly.
Very good, sir. Okay. Sir, I have listened very carefully to all what's been said, and it's wonderful, wonderful to see all our German friends here on board. Corona has made so many changes to our lives. Life after Corona is not going to be like the life before Corona, that's for sure. But what we need to do here is see the light beyond the tunnel. And I'm sure that, as I heard from many of you here, we need to do 3 things. One is to keep our institutions alive. We have to keep our tour operators, our airlines, our hotels alive. That needs direct support, either by loans or by grants or by any means. Second thing, we need to look at domestic and regional tourism, because that's the natural step. Then we go and look at international tourism. Can't jump to international tourism right ahead. This is our view. So I want to stress the point on domestic tourism. Domestic tourism is very, very important. I know tour operators, especially JITOA, are not accustomed to this. We're used to bring in people from abroad. And it's good because you bring in hard currency, you balance the trade, all of that. But what we need now is keeping our institutions alive, keeping our jobs going. So domestic tourism is very important. I also believe a matter of principle. No country should be enjoyed by anybody before it's enjoyed by its own people. A country that's not traveled through, known by its people, cannot and should not be enjoyed by anybody else. That's something that I'm sure in Europe you know very well, where 70-75% of travel is anyhow, domestic travel and regional travel. Back in the United States. That's what I want to say for this point in time. I'm looking forward to hear the rest of what's going on here. Thank you so much, Omar.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So going through the comments, one of the comments raised by Tariq Saifi is when we can expect tourism to start again. I think Mr. Adams highlighted this, that within Germany, there is that travel restriction in place till October 2020. Maybe you can tell us more about that and whether there are expectations to have that lifted anytime soon within Europe?
Well, within Europe, the general travel restrictions have been lifted more or less. We are getting travel warnings, advice from the Robert Koch Institute, which is, I mean, they are monitoring the health standards and the infection rates all around the world. And Robert Koch Institute, our Foreign Office, as well as our Ministry of Health and our Ministry of the Interior, they're getting together, they're sitting together and discussing which countries or which regions to put on the list and implement a travel warning for these regions. So it's more or less we are able to travel within Europe, but we are seeing certain restrictions for areas like Brussels, Paris, more or less the whole of Spain. But other areas, Greece is okay, parts of Croatia are okay, Poland, Eastern Europe is fine. Same is for Austria, parts of France, Italy is okay. So there are possibilities to travel outside of Germany, more or less unrestricted, but it gets more complicated when we are looking at destinations outside of Germany. And we are addressing the fact that we are seeing that some countries outside of the European Union have a far lower infection rate than some of the European countries. And we do not understand why there's a travel warning, which travel warning makes it very difficult for tour operators to bring in holiday makers. Because when these people come back from a country that has been declared a country of high risk, people will have to go into quarantine, and the quarantine issue is something that keeps people from traveling because they do not want to self-isolate for 14 days. So this is very detrimental. We're trying to persuade government to drop the idea of putting people into quarantine, but instead getting them tested twice, 3 times, or whatever, because the testing is, from our point of view, more effective. It's less detrimental on tourism and less detrimental on the workforce. I mean, just imagine how much money companies that are sending or sending their part of employees into other parts of the world because they're engineers and have to oversee sites, building sites, construction work and whatever, and they're coming back and they have to self-quarantine, self-isolate. It's a huge negative impact on the economy. So we are imploring government, take back the quarantine restriction with the quarantine, and instead have people that have visited places outside of the European Union or in places of high risk, just to get the tests.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that insight as well. Another topic that is raised by our colleague Fadi Sayes is related to hygiene and sanitation as an important aspect that the tourism sector needs to work on. And this is something that probably everyone on an individual level company does work on, but maybe collectively we do have a challenge. So I don't know, maybe Mareike or Andreas can share some best practice maybe from other destinations who had such issues and did overcome them, maybe in a more creative way.
Maybe I can just share, because I was talking about Total Resilient and Total Resilience. So after it was this initiative by GIZ and by Pacific Asia Travel Association and the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, it was actually established as a company in Germany. So it's an organization in Germany now, and they already came up with COVID-ready standards. So it's very similar to the standards that I described, but they are specifically for COVID. But they have the same components. So there's also the software component to it, the auditing component to it, and also the training component. So it's very similar. And it's not done by GIZ. That's why I didn't include it in the presentation, because I can't speak on behalf of this organization. But this is something that we've actually been through GIZ projects. Then we have been adapting and contextualizing these COVID-ready standards in different countries. So for example, in Palestine and in Sri Lanka, in order to provide recommendations to national governments there or association in these countries, how exactly they should be structuring like local standards related to hygiene and sanitation. So this is maybe something that could be interesting for Jordan as well. And yeah, as I said, so we do have like general standards, and they can be locally adapted and contextualized based on the needs in certain countries.
Okay, this sounds like a good opportunity to explore past the webinar. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So since we don't have any more comments or questions, I would like to ask Mr. Aouni Qawar, please, as a chairman, to wrap up and address his final comments to the attendees.
Thank you, everybody. Mr. Adams, Ms. Bentfield, Mr. Hoffman, Dr. Rifai, from North America, Maria. We heard from you last time. It's good to be updated about the German market. Specifically, it's a very crucial market for Jordan. It's a cultural niche market for us. It's always been very high in figures. We had tens of thousands of arrivals in 2019, and we were peaking that. We had a meeting with the German ambassador last year. We talked about the development and even a roadshow to Germany then. So I hope these days will come back post-corona. We'll think domestically, globally, regionally, and later globally. So let's be hopeful. Let's see the light at the end of the tunnel, like Dr. Rifai said, and let's hope for the best. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you, everyone. The presentations and slides will be uploaded to the JITOA website tomorrow morning. You will have access to them like we normally do in the other webinars. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye to Jordan.
Thank you so
Bye-bye
much.
to German. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.